It's tough.
We're going to get into it some more and look at what Jesus did. Here are some other words that they came up with that'll maybe help jog your memory and go, oh yeah, I was thinking of that word. Benevolent, charitable, humane, merciful, sympathetic, warm, warm-hearted, forbearing, pitying, sparing, tender, understanding, humanitarian, indulgent, kind-hearted, kind, lenient. They had a bunch of other phrases up there that I didn't really agree with, and I left them out. But anyway, it takes on many forms. Helping a friend move. Helping a friend who's lost a loved one, or lost a pet, or who knows. There's several ways that we can help people out. Helping them with their groceries. Taking their grocery cart back for them. Giving up your seat for an elderly person. Again, I got this list off of Google, and this next one. Giving up your seat to a pregnant lady. I italicized the pregnant, but I thought, you know, there was a time when a man would give up his seat for any lady. But now they specify, oh, well, I'm only getting up, you're pregnant. Are you pregnant? When's that baby due?
Don't do that.
Being polite to retail workers. Does anybody work retail? Not anymore. Visiting the sick, writing cards, calling. It takes a little bit of your time, and when you invest some of your time in them, it makes an impression on them. And they value you because you took the time for them. So, this comes up again later on, but that boosts your self-esteem, so it actually, you're lifting both of you up by serving other people. My little logo. I got home from work one day, and 3 of the neighbors are gathered over in a neighbor's driveway, standing out there talking. So after I pulled the garage, I went over to see what they're talking about. Well, the neighbor across the street from us hadn't mowed their yard this year. This was years ago. But anyway, it was about 2 months late in getting the grass cut, and it was needing cut really bad. And they're talking about what an eyesore it is, and it looks like nobody's living at the house. It looks like it's an abandoned house because the yard is just looking so pathetic. And one of them said, yeah, I called the city. They're supposed to be here later this week to cut that grass and give them a ticket. Okay. I turned around and started heading home, and they said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to go change my clothes, get my mower, and cut their grass. Why are you going to do that? I said, because that's what good neighbors do. You know, bless her heart, this lady, her husband left her, she's raising 3 girls, and mowing her yard is the last thing on her mind. She doesn't need the city to come write her a ticket for not mowing her yard. So I go to change my clothes, and I go get my mower out of the shed, and as I'm getting the mower out, I thought, I hear mowers. I go out, it pricked their conscience. It didn't take me 30 minutes to mow the yard, and I went, see how easy that was? So, and there was another time in the neighborhood, and you guys will probably remember this. It was a summertime, one of those thunderstorms that just blows up, and then when it collapses and there's this outflow of wind, and a Bradford pear tree on 112th Street collapsed and blocked that entrance off of Rockwell at 112th. And people were just kind of driving around it, driving over the limbs, and I thought, are they going to do anything about this? And because it's kind of like the entrance to the neighborhood, I think that homeowner thought, that's not my tree. And so he wasn't doing anything about it. The neighborhood association wasn't doing anything about it. And I thought, well, I'm gonna take my saw up there and cut this limb up. So I started cutting it up into sections, and I mean, it was too heavy. I couldn't just pick the thing up and drag it. I had to cut it up into chunks to get it out of the road. So anyway, then the neighbor across the street came over. What are you doing? I said, I'm trying to clean this limb up, or this tree up, so we can drive down the street. And he said, well, did they hire you? No, I don't even know who lives here. Haven't met them. Why are you doing it? I said, I just live around the corner. I want to be able to use the street. And anyway, this guy, he was pretty cranky. He's well, I've called the city on him. Okay. I've got some gloves. You want to help? I said, I'm just trying to be a good neighbor, trying to help them out. And so, I mean, I think it was a Sunday when I was doing that, because it was big trash day the next day. So I get it all cut up and piled up, and sure enough, they came by, picked the limbs up, and hauled them off. So it was, I got some converts on my street, but the guy that lives up on 112th, he wasn't a believer. Just going the extra mile, helping people out. That's just a few ideas of forms that compassion takes on. Kurt Brothers said this: compassion is at the heart of Christianity, it's at the heart of leadership, is at the heart of the ministry of Jesus. Jesus' ministry. What attracted the multitudes to Jesus? The miracles. That was on my list.
His compassion.
The message. The miracles. That's a good drawing card. But his compassion. More than anything else. They were drawn in by how he made them feel. Helping people out. What about people today? What will attract people to Christianity today? The message of forgiveness, the promise of eternal life. More than that, the compassion. Showing people that we care. Yeah.
I was going to say, also, if we are positive, like, I would say on like a daily basis, just like walking into work, I would just come in smiling. And this one lady was like, why are you always smiling? And I'm like, well, I'm glad to have a job, and I'm glad to be coming here, and, and I'm like, but sometimes just smiling and like being positive throughout your day is noticed. And, God gives us joy, and we can choose that to show, not just feel it, but show it. And people notice that.
You're jumping way ahead of me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But thank you for the comment. All right, Teddy Roosevelt said, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that is so true. You try to tell somebody how to do something, they're not going to want to listen to somebody that's just being a boss, a dictator. But if you do it in a caring manner, a loving way, they're going to be more receptive to that information. When I think about the compassion of Christ, the very first verse that comes to my mind is Matthew 9:36. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. That's the ESV and the NIV. Other translations, the ASV says distressed and scattered. The ISV says troubled and helpless. The King James says because they fainted and they were scattered abroad. The Net translation says bewildered and helpless. The New American Standard Version, though, I've carried this one for years, and not just because of this word. They were distressed and downcast. Anybody raise sheep? Anybody have experience with sheep? Nobody. I was the same way. It was funny when I was teaching a class out in Arizona, though. Oh yeah, everybody was familiar with sheep. Oh, okay. So they had more input on that. Downcast is an Old English word that referred to a sheep. I got a picture for you. Sometimes a sheep would be like a turtle. Mind your way. A sheep would be like a turtle, and they get on their back, and they can't get up. They're just laying there, and they are helpless. And when they get into this condition, what makes them get into this condition is if their wool is too long, or if it gets a bunch of mud caked in it, or weeds, stickers, whatever, that causes them. They're just out there, they've been grazing on this beautiful pasture, and they lay down, and they're just going, I think I'll just stretch my legs a minute. Oh, no. So they get stuck on their back. Well, what happens is it cuts off the blood circulation to their limbs. You ever sit through one of Tim's sermons and try to get your asleep? You can't stand and sing because that's what happens to the sheep. Their extremities loosely. So if you see a sheep like this, you'll set it up and then you have to massage their legs to get them to where they're able to walk again. They were distressed and downcast, like sheep without a shepherd. Nothing happened. Oh, I pushed the wrong button. Sorry. There we go. Okay, looking at the two words, distressed and downcast. The word for distressed, the Greek word is skulo, means to skin, flay, to rend, mangle, to vex, trouble, annoy, to give oneself trouble, or trouble oneself. The other word, ripto, to cast, throw down, cast forward or before, to set down with the suggestion of haste and want of care, to throw to the ground, prostrate, downcast, like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus' compassion. Matthew says that he records that 6 times Jesus touched someone. I'm sorry? Oh, yeah. Matthew 8:3. He touched the leper. You know what? You got time? I didn't put the verses on here. I thought it was going to be long enough. Starting back in verse 1. After he came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him. And a leper approached and bowed low before him, saying, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. He stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. I think I've got this on the next slide. But he touched him. He touched a leper. Lepers were outcast. They weren't supposed to be in the city. They're supposed to stay out of the city, and they couldn't be within sight of the temple. They had to stay away, and if somebody approached them, they were supposed to cover their face and say, unclean, unclean, just to warn them that they're there. Other people he touched. Peter's mother-in-law. 2 blind men in chapter 9, verse 29. Jairus' daughter. Peter, James, and John. This is after the transfiguration. And can you see Peter, James, and John? They're just entranced. What did we just see? And Jesus kind of brings them back to reality. He touched them. Come on, let's go. Oh. And don't tell anybody. What? 2 more blind men in chapter 20, verse 34. This phrase, he had compassion. 5 times in Matthew, 4 times in Mark, 3 times in Luke. And then there's one other time it says he had compassion when he's telling the parable of the prodigal son. And the father sees the prodigal son returning and the Father had compassion on him. His compassion was extended to castaways, the outcasts, the downtrodden, people that the Pharisees wouldn't even look at. They're not going to talk to him. They're not worth my time. About 4 years ago, when Chris was here, and he stops at a gas station, one that he frequented, and he went to the same gas station so often, he knew the names of the people working at the cash register. And so he would go inside to pay for his gas and strike up a conversation with people whenever he could. Well, while he's filling his car up with gas, this girl pulls in, and she's going through her cup holder, seeing how much money she has so she can buy gas to put in her car. So Chris goes back inside, and he gives the attendant $20, and he said, I want you to give that to her so she can gas up her car. Okay. Chris didn't say anything to her. He just, hi, and gets in his car and leaves. The next time Chris came, as soon as he walked in the store, the attendant at the gas station said, oh, Chris, come here, I've got a card for you. She had made a card, wrote him a note, thanking him for the gas money. And I'm thinking, if that were me, I'd say, what would you think? She needs to get a job, right? Maybe she shouldn't have a car if she can't afford the gas. That's kind of my way of thinking anyway. I don't know if y'all think the same way or not, but I don't know. I'm not a Chris, but he sees those opportunities right here in our backyard. He sees chances like that. I already read this. So, in the Greek, there's a word that is not in, there's not an English equivalent for the word that's in the Greek. Some translations put this behold in there. Behold, a leper approached. And I was trying to think of how to maybe illustrate this. I saw Wendy Nichols walk by. If we were all out on a hike and we're walking along, and she saw a snake, she'd go, oh, look, a snake. And, she would be kind and affectionate towards this snake. They like snakes. They go hunt snakes. But most of us probably would go, oh, snake. I think that's kind of what this is. I think it's a leper. It's just an exclamation. Because they're not supposed to be coming into town. They're not supposed to be coming up to people. And he comes up to Jesus and he bows down to him. Bow low before him, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. He stretched out his hand and touched him. Only another leper could touch a leper. I'm willing, be clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Then Jesus said to him, see that you do not speak to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and bring an offering that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Keep the law. Do what you're supposed to. Go show yourself to the priest and let him pronounce you as clean so that he could rejoin society, to be able to go back to his family. The word leper has several meanings. It's not just Hansen's disease, Mycobacterium leprae. Did I say that right? Kind of? Okay. It's a very slow-growing bacteria that causes the leprosy. It's, guess how it's spread? I'm sorry?
Respiratory.
Respiratory? Okay, let me phrase the question another way. Guess what animal spreads it? Armadillos. So there's another reason to run over them. They're pretty rare. It's pretty rare. There's only about 150 cases a year, new cases. Like currently, I think it said 6,500 cases is what we currently have. Yes, Melissa?
Sorry, I was just going to add, there were some people that said that maybe that was just a term for any kind of skin condition that people had, and so it wasn't always per se leprosy, but it could be like eczema or chickenpox or whatever people had.
She's ahead of me again.
Oh.
It's a general term that is used in the Bible for all skin disorders. Psoriasis, poison ivy. But anyway, it would just be termed as leprosy, as a leper. They were ostracized from society. They're supposed to stay away. The Talmud even specified they had to stay at least 400 cubits away from the city. And if it's Jerusalem, they have to be out of sight from the temple. They can't be seen. Matthew 26:6. Now, while Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, that's a key ingredient. So, there's Jerusalem, there's the Temple Mount, you've got the valley, and then across the valley is the Garden of Gethsemane, the Mount of Olives. Bethpage is called City of Figs. And then Lightfoot said Bethany means City of Dates. But after reading the Talmud and going back and looking at all the sources that even Lightfoot had, they couldn't find a reference to Bethany or the root word of Bethany. It's about 2 miles away from Jerusalem. And let's see, so I already said that Lightfoot said it was House of Dates. But that's been debunked, saying that neither Bethany or any form of the word appears in the Talmud as Lightfoot had claimed. So, you want to guess what the name really means? House of misery, or the poorhouse. Simon the leper lives in Bethany. Who else lives in Bethany? Mary, Martha, Lazarus. Bethany, the poor house. Now, while Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, reclining at the table, a woman came with an alabaster jar of costly aromatic oil from pure nard. After breaking open the jar, she poured it on his head. But some who were present indignantly said to one another, "Why this waste of expensive ointment? It could have been sold for more than 300 silver coins and the money given to the poor." So they spoke angrily to her. But Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a good service for me. For you will always have the poor with you, and you can do good for them whenever you want, but you will not always have me." 300 denarii, 300 silver coins. Why 300? How many days are in a year? 352. And you subtract off the 52 Sabbath days, and you've got a year's worth of wages. 300 denarii was 1 year of money to buy this one bottle of perfume. Okay, Dead Sea Scrolls. There was a scroll, one of the scrolls I found, that's called the Temple Scroll. It's the longest of the scrolls that they found. And they call it the Temple Scroll because there was detailed information about temple worship. and about sacrifices and just all the regulations of things that they did in and around the temple. It specified that there were 3 locations for the treatment of the sick. One was specifically for lepers that was east of Jerusalem. Sounds like Bethany. Bethany met all these requirements. It's more than 400 cubits away. It was out of sight of the temple. They couldn't see it because of the Mount of Olives. They're on the southeast slope of the Mount of Olives. It's the last rest stop before entering Jerusalem. If you remember that map, people coming from Galilee, they would travel down the east side of Jordan River, cross over at Jericho, and bring this road around that would go by Bethany into Jerusalem. So this is the last pit stop. Does anybody need to go? Back to compassion, though. Jesus touched the untouchables. The people nobody wanted anything to do with, he touched them. Jesus lived and ate with the sick and with the sinners. Do we have untouchables in Oklahoma City? Yeah, a few nods. Compassion is more than a deep feeling. Wayne was hitting on this a while ago. Pity, sympathy, those are feelings. Compassion and love are actions. They go beyond that. It motivates you to do something to help them out. Compassion tries to eliminate or alleviate the dilemma. You're trying to ease their pain, relieve them a little bit, take some of it off. John said in 1 John 3:18, "Little children, let us not love with word or with tongue, but in deed and truth. Show me your works." Jesus, he was a compassion magnet. 27 times in Matthew, Matthew talks about the multitudes coming to him, following him. They're attracted to a poor carpenter. He's from Nazareth, a town of disrespect. He didn't have a Christian college degree. He didn't go to rabbinical training. Matthew 4:23-25. Jesus went throughout all of Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, healing every kind of disease and sickness among the people. So a report about him spread throughout Syria. People brought to him all who suffered with various illnesses and afflictions, those who had seizures, paralytics, and those possessed by demons, and he healed them. And large crowds followed him from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan River. They followed him, occasionally for free food. We'll come to that in a second. Get a free meal, but to see the show. A lot of it was to see the miracles, but then a lot of it was his compassion. He was concerned about the people. I mean, he's the widow of Nain. He's walking into town, and here comes a funeral procession. And so he raises her son from the dead. And I forget who it was that said it. It said, Jesus ruined every funeral he went to. Because he cared, he healed their sick. He raised the dead, fed 4,000, 5,000. I just had a thought going back to Bethany. So Jesus is staying at the house of Simon the leper. Why do you think Jesus stayed out at Bethany? You think the scribes and Pharisees are going to go out to Bethany and go visit him? If it truly was a leper colony, that was his refuge. He could go stay in Bethany, and he didn't have to worry about the scribes and Pharisees bugging him while he's out there. He can visit with Lazarus, Martha, Mary, Simon. People that are despised by the Pharisees. But yet, that was a buffer for him. That was one place that he could have some shelter, have some safety, some space away from them. All right. Matthew 15:32. Then Jesus called the disciples and said, I have compassion on the crowd because they've already been here with me 3 days and they have nothing to eat. I don't want to send them away hungry since they may faint on the way. What's the longest you've ever gone without food? Hours? Let's see.
When the doctor forces you.
I'm sorry?
When you have like a procedure or something, is usually most people have to fast.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Having to fast for medical reasons. No, I can't eat. Doctor's orders.
Our dad always fasts when mom's out of town.
Oh, really? He doesn't like to cook, or?
I don't know. I know that's not really what that means.
But they had been 3 days without food. Now they counted days funny. It could only be like 26 hours, but they would consider that a 3-day span because it was part of this day and all of this day and part of this day. So, but even going 24 hours without food, that's kind of a challenge. He's afraid that they're going to faint leaving. We need to give this crowd something to eat. What do we have? Well, we got some little fish and some bread. Okay. Kirk Brothers said, if your house is on fire and you had to choose between your family or your iPhone, which are you going to pick? I don't have an iPhone, so I'm okay. If the church building caught on fire, are you trying to save the building or save the church? Assuming that you would, that everyone would say, we're going to save the people, his question was this: why do we spend so much on buildings and technology? And why do we spend so little time on people? That's just the opposite of what Jesus would do. If you're going to have compassion for people, you're going to have to share your life, spend some time with them. We had some friends that they had a son that was on the spectrum, and he would always just gravitate to this same young man in the youth group. And his mom asked him one day, said, why do you always go to him? The boy that he spends time with, that he hangs around with, was 2 or 3 years older. said, well, he cares. He will listen to me. He was what?
Nice to him.
Yeah. Made an impression on him because he would listen to him. Making it personal. To make leadership personal, we're going to have that air of compassion. We have to value our relationships. John Maxwell said, people are interested in the person who's interested in them. If you're not interested, if somebody a visitor comes up to talk, and you can't talk to them, you're too busy looking around. Surely there's somebody else here I need to talk to. I need to get away from this. We have to train ourselves to be better listeners, to focus on them. Are we truly interested in people, or are they just stepping stones? We have to invest in relationships. All right, so this John Maxwell had these 6 points that Kirk Brothers put into the book. 6 ways to show people that they matter. And Melissa's already given us some of the list. Become genuinely interested in others. What they have to say. Smile. Remember their name. How many of you know Ralph Bertrand? Quite a few of us. Doesn't it just amaze you the way he can remember your name? Fred Rhodes and I were talking about this, and said, he has a gift. I mean, once he meets you, he'll not only remember my name, he'll ask about them. Are they still in Owasso? How he is able to remember all that, it was truly a gift. And I wish I could do something like that. And I'd struggle remembering people's names. And it's funny, I have this thing with numbers. And if you came up and told me your name and your telephone number, I'd remember your telephone number, but I wouldn't remember your name. That's just the way I work. I don't know why. Janie Reinhardt, bless her heart. I have called her Jane and Jan and everything but Janie. But I've got her name down now, so hopefully I'll remember her. Be a good listener. One of the 6 ways to show people that they matter. Talk about their interests. Find out what they're interested in. What do you do on your time off? Do you have any hobbies? Make them feel important. The results of serving others, or the benefits of serving others, I've already mentioned this a little bit. You're valued in the recipient's eyes because you took time out of your life to help them. So they're going to value you because you spent some time helping them. It boosts their morale because you thought enough to help them. It's going to build them up, and because they value you, that's going to build you up, so it's a win-win situation. It distracts us from our problems. It boosts our self-esteem. It lowers blood pressure. This was a study that they did on people over the age of 50 that volunteered at least 200 hours per year. So less than an hour a day. But the people who volunteer their time actually lowers their blood pressure. It said it would lower it up to 40%. Yeah. Shocked me. John Maxwell said, one of the greatest remedies of our own suffering is to serve others. Servant leadership becomes a solution for both the one serving and the one being served. So by helping others, we're helping ourselves. Questions? Comments? Yes?
I have been impressed with the leadership of this congregation. They have all either been to visit our house or they made a point to look us up and they call us by name.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just been really impressed.
And also, I'm sure everybody's gotten calls from them. Hey, we're going to be praying for you tonight. What can we pray for? Everyone's nodding. Yep. You've all got that call. Wayne, did you get a call?
As a matter of fact.
Gus and Sherry Wilson, they love to tell the story of when they were a young couple, like at OC or something, and they said the reason we ended up like choosing North MacArthur as like a home congregation was because two of the elders in deep snow came walking across campus to their apartment, and like they said the snow was like knee deep, and they came and knocked on their door and said, "We were so glad you came to visit." They said, "We knew after that."
You can tell Harold Thurman's story.
Oh my goodness. Kenny was always at work, and I was always doing laundry, and Harold and Betty Thurman would come to the house. They probably came 3 or 4 times, and there's clothes everywhere. And I'm just like, come in the house, come on, you know what it looks like. He was never home, he was always at work, and there's Harold and Betty standing at the door. I'm like, oh my word, just come in. I'm done.
Yeah, when you show up unannounced, you get what you get.
That's right, that's what I told him too, and he just smiled, he said, you're fine. They were so cute, but yeah, and there's always, it was never picked up because you have little kids, you know, and that's, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was great. I just let them in. Come on.
You know what it looks like.
Amen. Amen.
You know, Kenny, compassion is a two-way street. And being one of the elders, I've learned a lot here in North MacArthur over the past 10 other years. But the sheep that we shepherd here, I don't know, a lack of a better word, are so deserving of what we are supposed to be doing because they listen, they pray with us. There's just so many good features to the Christians that meet here in MacArthur that I've not seen in different congregations where we've been. And it's not to condemn those congregations as much as it is just to say thank you for that relationship that we try to have with everybody.
Well, thank you for your service. Okay, next week we're going to be talking about Common. He had a humble heart. So, thank you for all your comments. We'll see you next week.